Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name is Chuck Wood, and I'll be your host. I'm joined by my co-host, Megan Dooley.
Hello
Megan,
there.
welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Megan's filling in for Donna while she's absent for a few shows. We have a very special guest with us today. She is no stranger to this show. Absolutely not. Justine Ginsburg has been here a number of times, sharing with you, the viewers, some very, very important information on the mental health, the stuff that's going on when resilience grows here, suicide prevention, and that's going to be our topics actually again today. Okay. Because there's a lot of updates, right?
It's an important one that we keep talking about, Chuck. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's for those that have been watching the show for a while. The issue of mental health is one of the things that we hold to dearly to ourselves. It's important because of the many cases of PTSD and everything else, and how it affects the veteran community.
There's a lot of taboo that sits around mental health, and particularly with our veterans. Yeah. So Resilience Grows Here, as we've talked about before, is a men's mental health program that was started by the Farmington Valley Health District with the very generous funding of the Movember Foundation. And we looked at our communities, and we looked at the people in our communities who are most at risk. And our veterans are our unsung heroes. Less than half of 1% of the civilian population ever raise their hand and say that they're prepared to serve. But our veterans make up a very large proportion of those in our communities that suffer from mental health challenges distinctly related to the service that they've provided our country.
And so why is the work that you do on Resilience Grows Here so important? Well,
look, I think part of the struggles that communities have is a lack of mental health literacy. So, how do you define mental health literacy? It's our ability to talk openly and comfortably about mental health challenges. There's a frightening statistic that we've talked about a few times, that in the United States, from the time a person develops a mental health struggle to the time that they actually seek treatment, it's 10 years. Wow. From the time of the first symptom that begins to impact their life to the time that they access mental health treatment is on average 10 years. So inside of that 10 years of time is so much impact on their personal life, on their ability to live, love, work and play.
It's silent suffering.
Absolutely, and our veterans are probably the strongest group of humans that I've ever worked with. They are the longest suffering. They don't want to admit that they have a problem because they don't want to take services away from another vet. Yeah. I mean, that is the war cry I hear time and time again. Help that guy, he needs it more than I do. But all of them need assistance when they're struggling.
One thing that should be pointed out to the viewers, and I know we'll probably cover this, later on this show. If not, this is a two-part show to the viewers. That's one of the things I should have mentioned beforehand. That's how important this issue is. So this is part one of a two-part series. Now, the longer one waits, the worse it is. You say 10 years. Now, me coming from the, I guess, the responders, background, corrections, if you don't get a treatment immediately, it forms around you like concrete.
Absolutely.
And the worse off it is to try to get help, or to have help, work for you.
Well, part of the problem is when we have those first early signs of something happening in our mental health and well-being. We're not sleeping well, we're struggling with flashbacks, we've got some issues dealing with some of the anxieties and stresses and depression that might have impacted us from service. If we don't ask for help at that point when it's small and it's something that we can refer somebody to a mental health provider with some, CBT, some close peer-like networking, family gathering around them, working with other veterans and other members of the community, that's the easy part. If we wait, it goes underground.
Yes.
And now it starts to affect their relationships at home. It starts to affect their ability to be a productive worker. That then impacts their relationships at home. That then opens up the doors to substance misuse disorders, which negative feedback cycle. Now it starts to impact their relationships. Now it starts to impact their work. And you can see how the cycle gets worse and
It's
worse
a domino effect.
the longer we leave it.
Yeah.
Exactly, and they also think that maybe something's wrong with them, they're broken. And
Absolutely.
That's not the case.
No, and look, one of the things we've advocated so hard for over the years is we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, is removing the disorder part. Post-traumatic stress happens when a person has been exposed to an abnormally stressful event. Having a reaction to that is the most normal thing that could happen.
Yes.
It's how do we deal with the reaction that you're having? Now, we can't guarantee that we can cure somebody of the trauma, but what we can do over time is we can help them to have a less significant reaction to the memories of the trauma so that they're able to live with that and be able to have those close connected relationships and successful career, be able to be involved in their community. Part of the recognizing of the fact that there's no stigma attached to having these struggles. If anything, we have to talk more about it, and that's why we come onto the Veterans Corner so often.
Yeah, it's important. With you, equine therapy, anything that has to do with mental health,
Yeah.
we try to get that topic on this show as often as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important to highlight other organizations, but it's important to highlight one of the major elephants in the room.
You know, with Resilience Grows Here, when we started, and we did a lot of work with veteran populations, we worked with active service members, members of the National Guard, veterans, veteran families. The one thing we discovered is that veterans return to communities, they don't return to programs. We've got to stop building programs and expecting veterans to fit inside of them.
Yeah.
The programs have to fit inside of the veterans community, and their community is actually the program. And that's why the types of programs like we're going to talk about, or the types of evidence-based trainings that we're going to talk about today with the QPR suicide prevention training, is everybody's responsibility. Yeah. You know, if less than half of 1% of this population serve actively in our military, that leaves 99.5% of the rest of us that need to step up and do a 90-minute training.
Wow, that is some people would think that you're asking quite a lot of them, but really that's a drop in the bucket to help. Exactly. Totally. So let's talk about the risk factors in communities for suicide. So what are these risk factors that put people more at risk?
Yeah, so, you know, remember when we're talking about risk factors, we're not just talking about veterans, we're talking about all of us. We're talking about our teenagers, our youth, people who are in a sandwich generation, those that are caring for elderly parents and young children and working. There's that, you know, the pressure that happens inside of that powder keg as well. The risk factors are societal, so as a society we have access to lethal means. We know that the number one weapon of choice in active suicide for men is a firearm. So being able to, and you know, we can get into Second Amendment discussions, and it's actually got nothing to do with that. No. If you are a gun owner, you need to make sure that your gun is responsibly stored and is not able to be accessed, because we know one of the risk factors is that someone who's dealing with a suicidal ideation, we know that suicidal ideations aren't permanent. They're transient, and they're about a specific incident that's happening in somebody's life. So easy access to lethal means makes a very lethal ending to a temporary problem. So by restricting access to that incredibly lethal means, it buys us time. So that's one of the huge societal risk factors. The other thing is the way we talk about suicide, the way our media portrays suicide. You think about the last movie or television series you watched about veterans and how veterans were portrayed. How many times were veterans portrayed dealing with their mental health challenges as being a normal part of life? How many times were veterans portrayed in these big blockbuster Hollywood movies as being people who are safe in a community. The glamorized part is the veteran that's struggling with the worst day of their life is what we then put on television. That's not the case with the veterans that live in our communities, but that's how we stigmatize them. So why would you put your hand up and ask for help?
Yeah.
Why would you say, I'm a vet and I'm suffering from PTSD, if the latest Hollywood blockbuster has just stigmatized you?
Yeah.
And also that Hollywood stigmatization is also saying this is your reality, this is what you're supposed to be feeling, and this is how you're supposed to be doing it, which is also nefarious and insidious.
Absolutely, and look, we push a lot of the needs of our veterans underground. You know, we have the 4th of July, and this is the debate we have in this country every year. You know, make sure you post if you're going to let off fireworks, and then people say, well, I'll post because I've got a veteran living in my community, and somebody else will say, but I shouldn't have to post. You know, the veteran chooses to live in my community. We've lost the ability just to be good neighbours. We've lost the ability just to say, you know, somebody served our country, and fireworks where they don't know they're going to go off might have an effect on this person's ability to feel safe. So let me be a good neighbour and do the right thing. So the risk factors are communities that don't think about looking after each other, whereas the protective factors are people who do think about those that live around them. How do I cater for those who live in my community that might be struggling right now?
That's great that you brought up protective factors. What are other protective factors that a community can do in order to keep a veteran not only safe, but also make them feel, I guess the best word I could do is normal.
Yeah.
Because when you are suffering with PTSD, you don't feel normal. You could feel, and you'll be asking, why am I not how I used to be? So
I think, look, one of the things, again, we work really hard with Resilience Grows Here, is to educate communities that a veteran's now is their normal now. You know, just like, you know, I always like to equate a veteran's PTSD with the type of PTSD someone might experience if they'd gone through, you know, a terribly traumatic event, or, you know, a sexual assault. We are very good at talking about that openly on the media. We talk about that very comfortably. The PTSD that our veterans are suffering from has a similar type of effect. We should be able to talk about it just as openly and just as comfortably. And if a veteran needs to take a time out, that's okay. That's them looking after themselves.
Exactly.
We should be asking, what do you need? How can I help? What's going to make you feel more comfortable? That's the conversation as communities we need to be having. You know, other protective factors that communities can put in place is really good access to mental health services in the community in which our veterans live. One of the huge struggles we have is when a veteran is brave enough to ask for help, and they can often have some pretty intensive mental health therapy. When they come back into the community in which they live, they should be able to access mental health expertise where they live, whether they live in a small town, whether they live in a big city. They shouldn't have to travel large distances to be able to get to a helping hand.
Exactly.
You know, one of the reasons we do QPR trainings is that everyone can perform some of that layperson role. Everybody can be a safe place for a veteran to talk. Everyone can be that person who can say, what do you need right now? How can I help? What can I do to ease some of the burden that you're carrying?
Yeah.
And listen without judgment.
You had mentioned the QPR training. What is QPR training?
Sure. So QPR is a wonderful evidence-based program that's a 90-minute, QPR stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. So in that 90 minutes, you will learn how to ask the question if you know somebody is struggling. And again, let's just really focus on the fact that a suicidal ideation is not a permanent state of being.
Yeah.
So someone who's not permanently suicidal, they're feeling suicidal about something that's happening in their life, and there's a series of risk factors or events that can trigger a person to feeling that way. But the training will teach you how to ask the question and do so non-judgmentally. Sometimes people are really frightened to ask, are you thinking of taking your own life? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Because they're terrified of the answer being yes.
Yeah.
The bravest thing a person can do is actually to say yes to that question. That takes, that's the superhero moment, when someone is able to be vulnerable enough to say, I'm really struggling, and right now I don't know that I can go on. because they're asking for help. When we work with somebody who's dealing with suicidal ideation, they often feel alone in a crowded room. Everybody's around them, but nobody sees them. And doing a QPR training will help you to see that person. And by asking the question, there's almost always a sense of immense relief. Finally, you see me. Finally, somebody can see that the bravado is just that, it's bravado. There's something deeper happening inside. The persuade part of question, persuade, refer is about really listening without judgment and really listening to why a person is feeling the way they are and reassuring them that their life is important, that they're needed, that they have a role and a place in their family, in their community. And the refer part is knowing where to refer someone. If somebody tells you that they're suicidal, you're not going to leave that person. No. So what do you do and how do you make sure that that person is linked into the right resources to provide them with the care that they need at that moment, and recognizing that they also have to come back into our community. One of the greatest roles that mental health literate communities have is when someone has told you that they're struggling and has had the courage to say, right now I'm not coping, is to welcome them back like the heroes that they are.
And they have. They've given so much,
yeah.
And they've protected. When you go overseas, when you sign up, when you do take on that mantle of not only an active service member and you come home a veteran, you have put your life on the line to protect people.
Absolutely.
And when they come home to our country, it is now our responsibility to protect them.
Absolutely. And look, I think when you ask somebody to do a 90-minute training, they think, oh, how am I going to fit it in at the end of my day? I work till 6. And you know what? It's 90 minutes. It's 90 minutes that you're going to spend where you are going to learn a skill that is going to save somebody's life. How many of us are trained in CPR?
I am.
I am.
Used to be.
So it's one of the #1 trainings. You know, the Red Cross does an amazing job of making sure that if someone's to have a heart attack, that there's a chain of survival. Someone is going to be able to begin CPR and then wait to call in the next most qualified person in the room. How many times in your life do you think you're going to come across somebody having a heart attack?
I honestly hope never, because that sounds so frightening.
Yeah.
Because that is on you now. You are in their shoes and to help someone's life. But at the same time, if you are between all that they have, that last lifeline, I will happily do what it needs to be done.
So
you'd be surprised at what triggers inside. You just do it.
Yeah.
Having worked in corrections for 20 years as supervisor and military, I mean, you'd be surprised when the time comes what you're capable of doing. You just do it. You deal with the aftermath afterwards,
yeah.
Because there will be, because it's not normal for you to have to do that.
And you know, one of the things we talk about when we train people in QPR is part of your responsibility is looking after yourself. You know, self-care is part of the protective factors, teaching people to provide care for themselves. If you've had to intervene in with somebody who is suicidal, it's really knowing how you look after yourself after that fact. After that person now has the professional care that they need, how do you then look after yourself? Because of course it impacts you. You know, I'm a registered nurse by training. I was an intensive care specialist. I've done CPR in a hospital many times. I've done CPR once in the community in all my years. And I've performed QPR more times than I can count. More times than I can count, because it's a simple conversation.
That's fascinating. But you talked about self-care. You have here to build resilience skills. What do you mean by building resilience skills?
See, resilience grows here. It's in the name. What we know, one of the most protective factors for a community is building a community that's able to, you know, the common term is bounce. So how do we bounce back after adversity? But, you know, resilience is something that some people are born with. Some people are more innately able to deal with hardship and kind of, you know, see the silver lining of the rainbow, of the cloud. Sorry. Yep. But you can learn resilience. So resiliency is about recognizing that all of us have to show up each day with, you know, new page concept. You know, just because yesterday was terrible doesn't mean today is going to be. Just because the last hour wasn't great doesn't mean the next hour isn't going to be. It's about setting yourself a goal and a plan and taking time and being patient with yourself. You know, today in society we always want to get everywhere yesterday. We don't provide ourselves with a lot of opportunity to try and fail and try and fail. You know, I think Erickson said, I didn't have 1,000 failures, I had 999 failures and one success. It's not about the failures, it's about the success. You know, resiliency is about learning to look at adversity and see where the lesson lies. It's about providing yourself with self-care. What works for you? What reduces your stress levels? It's different for everyone. Some people like to exercise. I know Chuck likes to do yoga, meditation. Not yoga?
No.
Oh, man, I was sure
I needed a
he did.
chiropractor the last time I tried that. So.
I mean, I swear he was bragging about it the other day.
I'm sure I heard that too,
Downward facing
Megan.
dog and all that.
Absolutely, I'm sure I heard that as well. But it really is finding what...
You got me speechless on that one.
Oh, Chuck.
And
Never.
you know me, when am I speechless?
But you know what it
Yoga.
also is? Connections.
Yeah.
Human beings need to be connected, and connection is the antidote to isolation. Isolation is where people feel disconnected and alone and as though they can't deal with that next big challenge. But if you've got connections, connections with your family, connections with your friends, connections with your peers, connections in your workplaces, that's the protective factors. That's resilience.
And also, it was a study that I came across today that calling people just because you're not annoying them, they don't know how transformative that could be to someone's day. So if there is someone in your life who you haven't heard from them, they're not going to mind you giving them a call and saying, hey, what's up? Let's meet for coffee. But I know we're running out of time, so let's remind the folks at home about when these trainings are.
Absolutely, and you know, I'm going to refer to my little piece of paper. In fact, I think I gave it to Chuck. I do that a lot. So we've got 2 trainings coming up. So this is 2022, because I know that sometimes we do replay some of these shows. So on the 25th of August from 6 to 8 p.m. and on the 22nd of September from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Farmington Valley Health District in Canton, we're going to be providing QPR classes. They're free, they're sponsored by Resilience Grows Here. So we welcome the folks at home to call us at the Farmington Valley Health District. I'm sure they'll put the number on the screen, but it's 860-352-2333. Call and ask for myself, Justine, or one of the Resilience Grows Here team, and we'll sign you up. It's 90 minutes of your life that I promise you will be able to use time and time again to protect your families.
That was,
and friends.
Is that the class that I drove down to Milford?
It was indeed.
Yeah,
it was indeed.
It was definitely worth the drive. It was a great day.
Yeah, no, it's...
that was at the VFW, I believe it was.
Absolutely. You know, we have trained in, we've been in operation for 6 years. We've trained over 4,000 members of our community.
4,000?
4,000. And we know for sure that we have saved 36 lives.
Wow.
So those lives we know because someone who's taken our class will call and say, oh my God, I used that on my stepson.
Yeah.
Or I had a friend and I was really worried, and after I took the class I went and knocked on their door and we had that conversation. So, you know, every year at Thanksgiving in my family we sit around the table and we talk about what we're thankful for, and every single year as that number goes up, that's what I'm most grateful for, because that's 35, 36, 38 families that are together because somebody took 90 minutes out of their day to learn how to ask the question.
It's rewarding for you.
Oh.
I mean, it's that's the ultimate reward.
Well, you know, I'm part of the 99.5%. I have never served my country in a military role, but I will continue to do this role.
Well, on behalf of the veteran community, we want to thank you for everything you do for the veterans.
Oh, well, I thank you guys for all that you have done for us and for raising the hand and you know, sacrificing your freedom, a lot of your mental health and well-being to keep us safe and protected here. So thank you for your service, Chuck.
That's about all. That's all the time we have. It goes by fast.
Good thing we have a part two.
I'm glad we're doing a part two. Want to thank you for being here again. It's always an absolute honor.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you, and to the viewers, thank you for watching. That's it for the Veterans Corner. See you next time. Good night.
Riverview Apartments is Bristol's two-time beautification award-winning residence community for adults age 55 and older. They offer 1 or 2 bedroom apartments with modern appliances, air conditioning, wall-to-wall carpet, and tiled floors. Both heat and hot water are included. Riverview also offers a wide range of activity rooms that include a billiard parlor and a spacious community room. It is handicap accessible with safe, secure parking for tenants and ample off-street parking for visitors. 860-940-6757 or riverviewbristol.com.